now. Um, I wish there was an easier way to tell on here. I've never done this um, from the computer before, but I'm trying that, hoping that it will help my connectivity issues. So, um, yeah, I believe we are live. So I will go ahead and begin our talk for today. As promised, we're going to talk about Neuralink. And um, I navigated away from the Facebook window here so that I can read my notes. So hopefully you can all still um, hear me and see me and all that good stuff. So, yeah, I don't think I actually introduced myself on the previous videos, but my name is Connie, spelled with a K. And so, um, my next video will probably be with using my glasses again. If everything goes as I hope it will, I'm planning on being out and about somewhere with my white cane, demonstrating how some of the techniques blind people use for traveling around and getting from place to place and whatnot. And so I probably won't be doing that one live because I don't want anybody freaking out. um, and saying, "Oh no, you're gonna get run over," and things like that. That would be kind of distracting. But anyway, I've been having some issues with my glasses and being out and about, but I'm hoping they are resolved now. So if they are, that will probably be next on the docket in a few days. Um, but in the meantime, we are here today to talk about this great company I just heard about a few months ago. But um, I guess I'll start at the beginning by saying that my sister and I and our two younger brothers have an eye condition called Libra congenital amaurosis. And my sister and I were taken to many eye doctors as kids and everything, but we could never get a straight answer. Back then, of course, things weren't advanced, medically speaking, as they are now. But it was kind of a mystery because no one up until that point had had any eye conditions on either side of our family, so it was kind of a mystery as to what was causing the issue. But we grew up in a very religious home, and our parents always strongly believed that we would be healed one day, that we would get our sight. Um, but basically, that would be the only way that we would ever have our sight because the kind of condition that we have, um, there wasn't any medical cure for our blindness. So, aside from medical or miraculous intervention or a divine intervention or what have you, we would just always be blind. And I mean, it really never um, bothered us because we didn't know any different. Being blind was just pretty much normal for us. And it was like having our sight would just be kind of like a luxury, just like having $1 million would be for you or whatever. It wasn't really anything we ever really even thought about. I'm sure it probably bothered other people that we couldn't see more than it did us. So we just learned alternative techniques, and we all are living full and happy lives and all that. And now, all these decades later, though, I just learned about this company that claims they can give sight to even people that have never seen before. Basically, by planting a computer chip in your brain and it going directly to the visual cortex, so it like bypasses your eyes entirely. And so I was just very intrigued by this concept. At the moment, they already put one of these Neuralinks, they call it, into their first patient who is um, a quadriplegic, and that was a few months ago, and he's able to do amazing things already, play video games just with his brain. Basically, he can control the mouse and his computer. And anyway, you can research all this further because I'm just explaining it in very rudimentary terms. So if you want to know more about it, just feel free to Google it. It's quite easy to find info about it and whatnot. But basically, there's just a camera linked to your brain, and yes, robots do the brain surgery because it's too delicate, and for humans, of course, putting electrodes or whatever, planting them in your brain is kind of a delicate matter. But the more I heard about it, I mean, at first it just kind of sounded unbelievable, but I just kept doing more and more research. And I just thought, wow, that would be cool. And some people, blind people, might hesitate at the prospect of like suddenly just having your sight. I mean, it would be kind of shocking, especially if you had never seen anything before. And they might just think it would change too many dynamics in the current way of how their lives are. And um, there's probably some truth to that. And then there's other people at the other end of the spectrum that claim that like blindness really isn't. I wouldn't say really they're in denial, but they just say that blindness doesn't really present any challenges, or that their lives, they couldn't imagine their lives being any better if they could see or whatever. And I used to kind of have that mentality. Like I would just say that blindness is just a physical nuisance or inconvenience or whatever. But as I've gotten older and matured more and just thought about it more and like observed more of exactly, just thought about how easy it is for sighted people to accomplish certain things. And I no longer quite have that attitude. I think there are really some things that are a lot easier if you have sight. Um, but if you're blind or whatever, and if you have another opinion, I'd love to hear it in the comments. 'Cause I'd love to have this be an interactive experience and give me food for thought, and maybe I can do future videos on like the other side of how people might view this. But yeah, I have a really good life, and I'm able to accomplish whatever I want to do. I just figure out different ways of doing things, and I'm sure that's just easier for me to like come up with different ways that don't involve vision, because like for a sighted person, vision would be the first thing that you would think about, like just doing it with your eyes, 'cause that's just easier. But for me, the automatic thing is figuring out how to do something in a different way. So but basically, my thought is just with this Neuralink thing, I mean, why not? Why not try it? Why not make things even easier if possible, just like any other piece of technology I might use or whatever, or you might use to make your lives easier. Whether it's just a tool you use in your kitchen to make cooking a little bit easier, or a big piece of technology, it's kind of all the same concept. I mean, some people might say that we're talking about brain surgery here. That's a little bit more risky than just your typical kitchen tool or gadget or whatever. But it's still the same. Overall concept is the same. I mean, just like people weren't afraid to get in the automobile for the first time when it was first invented. I mean, I'm sure some people were terrified of it. And I mean, there were all kinds of dire things said about that too. And even though life was perfectly doable before the car came along, I mean, some people just had a vision of how it might drastically improve things. And of course, now none of us can imagine life without it. Um, and so, yeah, when I first mentioned all these thoughts I was having on Facebook, a friend of mine, Marge, recommended that I read a book by Mike May, and it's called Crashing Through. And I would really recommend it to anyone that's interested in this issue, especially if you're blind. Um, I really learned a lot from the book. It just gave me a lot of food for thought and just brought up a lot of things I wouldn't have thought of otherwise. And what struck me the most about after reading the book was this whole idea that if I do get my vision back someday, it probably won't be all at once. I'll basically have to learn how to see. So it won't be like this if it was this big divine miracle type thing, like 1 minute you're blind and the next minute you can see. It would be very different from that because my brain has never been, that part of my brain has never been exercised at all. Like other people learn to see as babies, and it's like a gradual process for them too, but of course it's all before they can even have any memory of it later or whatever. But basically everybody has to learn to see, but learning to see as an adult would be a whole lot different. And it would be really gradual and require a lot of patience and hard work basically. So I'm sure it'd be very exciting, obviously, but there would be a lot of exasperating moments and frustrating moments as well. Like people, one of the first things that questions that come to mind is, what's the first thing you would want to see? Like, would you want to see your kids' faces, or just like, would you want to see something spectacular like Niagara Falls or the Grand Canyon or whatever? And but in this kind of scenario that I'm talking about, the first days or weeks, I mean, I probably wouldn't even be able to recognize what a face was when I saw it. That would all have to be taught to me. Basically, I'd have to learn what everything feels or what everything looks like. It just wouldn't be intuitive at all. Like Mike was blind for most of his life. He's the author of the book I mentioned, or it's a biography about him, and he regained his some of his sight. It ended up being like very little, but compared to what he had before that, which was zero, I mean, it made a big difference for him. And I just really like his attitude about it, though. He just went into it because he had done some research before too, or whatever, of other people, that the very few that were able to regain their sight after being totally blind, and a lot of them were not. It didn't go well for them for various reasons. Because just basically some just had unrealistic expectations of what the world was going to be like, and they were disappointed that things weren't as beautiful or whatever as they thought it would be. Or other people just they were just already had their lives figured out, and it was just too much of a shock. And so yeah, there's just you have to. Mike's attitude about it though was just, he was just curious. He just wanted to know what would happen. And so like if he wouldn't have gotten any sight, it would have been fine because he lived a really full life before that too. And he was like, he was very athletic, a very like well-known skier that did all these stunts and tricks and stuff on his skis and everything. So he was well known for that, and he was just kind of thinking about, like, once if he got his sight, he wouldn't he would just be another guy on the slopes skiing or whatever. He wouldn't like stick out as much as this person that was blind and yet had overcome obstacles to to get his to I mean, it wouldn't be as amazing, I guess you would say. Some people have a problem with, I don't want to be thought of as amazing, but some people just really are talented. Like my brother, for example, he's an amazing musician. He lives in Nashville, and I'm sure the fact that he is also blind gives him more notoriety, even though it shouldn't in a way. I mean, it kind of bugs him sometimes that um, that people think, oh, he can play all these instruments and he's blind or whatever. But um, if he could see, I wonder what difference that would make. I mean, he would still be. It's just a remarkable, whether you're blind or sighted, that he can play as many instruments as he can to the professional degree and everything. But yeah, just all kinds of aspects like that to think about. So yeah, like getting back to what I was saying about like seeing faces, I would have to learn what a face looks like, and like in Mike May's book Crashing Through, it talks about like he was really tempted to want to touch everything that he saw because he was puzzled, what is this thing? But once he touched it and it was more familiar then through his sense of touch, then he could put all the pieces together and he thought like, oh, okay. Um, so this is a face, so eyes, and so below that would be the nose or whatever. And then so then and once he saw it after that, after he had touched whatever it was, then he could learn how that looked. And it was just really interesting, some of the stories he told, like about his kids, like when their dad could see and how what they thought of it. And like I said, I would just really recommend the book to anyone who's interested. But that was really one of my big takeaways, was that even though he would have been fine either way, whether he got his sight back or not, he still wanted to try it, and he was willing to go through a lot to um, even keep the little bit of vision that he was able to gain. Like the end of the book talks about, I don't want to give any, well, spoiler alert here, you might want to skip ahead. Or, well, it's not, I don't know, it's not really a spoiler alert, but he just talked about this really painful experience he went through um, because his eyesight was starting to deteriorate again, so that like they had to stick needles in his eyes, and oh, I can't even imagine that. But he went through it, and he was glad he did, because it did help him to keep the sight that he had regained. And so yeah, I think there's just a lot of value, and like I said, I just want to see what happens, but I would be fine either way. But I'm just very intrigued by this Neuralink, because what they envision, I mean, we could really do a whole another video about what they ultimately want to do with this entire project, and I'm sure we will do another video at some point. But this particular video, I just wanted to focus on the blindness part, which that's what they're going to be doing next now with their upcoming patients. It's called Blind Sight, is like the sub project underneath the Neuralink that they're going to be focusing on, which will be blind people. And they think that eventually you might even end up having more vision than like anyone else, like more than 20/20 vision, I guess, eventually. But of course, one step at a time. But yeah, so I think it would just open up new doors of opportunity and learning, basically. And I just want to know the good, bad, and the ugly of how the world really works. I'm just really curious. I've always just been curious about so many things and love learning and learning new things, especially if my mind gets changed about something and my perspective gets, um, like if I just learn someone else's perspective, that helps me to develop, continually be adapting my own perspective about things. And so, yeah, I just wonder, like, for example, what would totally surprise me if once I was able to see like that I had never thought about. Like just the other day, for example, my son was talking to me about how long he had spent trimming his beard because he wanted to get it just right. And I said, well, wow, after you spent all that time on it, let me check it out. So I put my hands on his face to see what a good job he had done trimming his beard. It's not something I do very often. And in fact, to illustrate that, it was just so funny. But once I did that and felt his beard and everything, I just burst into tears because, I mean, I knew he had a beard and everything, but actually touching it, um, I could almost start crying again now just thinking about it. And I don't know why, really. It's not really anything to cry about, but it just took me so much by surprise because since I don't see him every day, I mean, in my mind, he's just still a kid in a lot of ways. Um, but yet he's 21 years old. And so, yeah, just things like that that I wouldn't even have thought about. But I'm sure there would be a lot of other things like that too. And I'm just really curious to know what it would be like and what would totally surprise me. And so, yeah, if it ever happens, I signed up for their patient registry thing, or I tried to, but it wouldn't let me get past the first page for some reason. I'm not sure why, but yeah, so once I do finally get through, and if that was just for the they're taking like pre trial clinical trials right now, so whether I get in on that phase or whether I wait until they're actually, I mean, because there was even this quadriplegic that has already had this Neuralink surgery. He was out of the hospital in a couple hours. So like they're predicting that eventually this will just be like totally routine and like that blindness would totally be eradicated at some point. But yeah, like I can see where that might give a lot of people false hopes and they might just not even want to learn alternative techniques or anything like that because they're just waiting to get their sight back someday, which I don't believe is the right approach at all. I mean, until that day comes, or if that day never comes, I'm going to still want to learn all the alternative ways of doing things. And so yeah, but I'm thinking I'm going to draw this to a close because I'm starting to get hoarse for some reason. But thanks for joining me. Be sure to like and subscribe and share and all that good stuff. And I really appreciate you guys coming along on this journey with me. And if I do have the Neuralink surgery, I will take you with me. So you'll get to observe every step of the way. And we'll all learn what it's like together. So thanks for watching. And I'll talk to you next time. Bye.